support my tongue. You will never be the same.
And with the full catastrophe, he didn't mean it was all bad.
God that I worship has a way of saying, don't play with me.
I invite you to the dance with the Lord of the dance.
God didn't call America to do what she's doing in the world now.
Please dance.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of Remote Pastoral Care. We got part 2 here with the lovely, wonderful, and incredibly intelligent Courtney Fraley, who gets mad every time I compliment her. So I'm going to throw a few more in there. Say hi.
Howdy.
And we are continuing with part 2 of our discussion on basically what the hell even is church and what's the point? Which, of course, is a grand question that we're totally going to have answers for, I promise. And if we don't, then you can definitely say nothing about that, because obviously we're not going to have complete concrete answers about that by the end. But at least we're going to get somewhere with it. So, where were we leaving off with this?
You're asking the wrong person. Thoughts
fair.
leave my brain and just jet off to Cucamonga. No.
We had diverged a little bit into Christianity a la Americana, and you talked a little bit about the kind of the founding fathers doing this own kind of unique thing. And I thought that was an interesting thing to note because, the creation of the American system of governance wasn't unique. They stole it from exactly 2 places. One, the Native Americans.
That's true. Yeah, the Iroquois League.
Yeah, the Iroquois Confederacy, a lot of their great law of peace was kind of the cornerstone for our Constitution. But the other half of it, the system that they imposed upon that, the Great Law of Peace was kind of the model for a lot of their moral and ethical direction, but their structure, they stole almost whole cloth from one source. The Presbyterians.
Really?
For a long time, the American system of government was called the Presbyterian system. And even in England, they referred to them as those Presbyterians because of, derogatively, of course, because they just stole a church system of government and started using it for their own. The idea of a multi-branch system with divided sectors of power that works on what would eventually become Robert's Rules of Order, this kind of debate system, that's how Protestant church government works. And it was taken almost entirely from the Presbyterians. How's that for a little mind blow right there?
I mean, contrary to what you're kind of hoping for from that, I feel like that throws a bone to the people who were like, America's a Christian nation.
It's a Christian nation. It's a Christian nation if you realize that they took the institutional structure and left out all the religious pieces. So I mean, I guess, but no. They were very clear that the religion had nothing to do with it, but they did take the structural system, because like it or don't, the Presbyterian system is a pretty effective democratic system. However, it's worth noting that the Presbyterian system, as it's been called, that Presbyterianal system, is a product of that type of church that we were talking about earlier. The institutional church, the structural church, the one that eschewed communism in favor of a hierarchical system. Now, there have been moves by churches more modernly to start trying to lose some of that, but institutionally, we've been so vested in a hierarchically organized system that we haven't found a good way to lose that and still keep operating on a national/international level.
Well, I feel like getting rid of a hierarchy is especially difficult from an organizational standpoint, because how do you organize a group without having some sort of leadership? And again, a very small group, sure. I mean, if you're talking about your lab group in chemistry or whatever, you've got 4 people, okay, you can all have just an equal say in it. You don't need to have a leadership structure or whatever. Small enough group.
Massively overestimate my background in the hard sciences.
Huh?
Says you massively overestimate my background in the hard sciences.
No, I'm not saying hard sciences. I'm talking
I know what you mean.
like high school or intro community college chemistry, like I'm talking like classes I've taken with my liberal arts degree. No, I'm just talking about like if you have a small group of people, like a very small group of people, like 10 or less, like it's not that hard to have direct representative democracy where it's like everybody votes and everybody gets an equal say and nobody's say counts more than anybody else, and we're all equals here.
Yeah.
But a group of any kind of size, I feel like it's very difficult to not just have any kind of leadership structure. So I feel like that sort of thing would be really hard to shake and isn't necessarily something to demonize.
And I'll present you with an opposite problem too. And this is what I've seen in a church with which I've recently worked, is it's possible to go so far in the other direction where you create voting and polls and surveys for every single thing about the entirety of church life.
Yeah.
And then everybody gets burned out immediately. Nobody wants to do it. Notwithstanding the fact that a million opinions make decisiveness impossible.
Yeah.
So there are problems in both ends, so that it would seem like the solution would be somewhere in the middle, but I don't know what that's should look like. But the problem is, and this is what we come back to when we talk about what church is supposed to be, it's the problem of power. Once people get power, it's hard to get them to share it or to let it go. A good example of this, and this is a hypothetical we're often given in seminary, is you as the pastor have a decision to make that is a decision you should make about how to deal with something in the church. And you take it to the consistory to get opinions. And you say, and you ask for a non-binding vote. It's not going to bind, but this vote is meant to inform me as to where everybody's at. The vote is 9 out of 10 against, 1 in favor. What do you do?
I don't know, dude. No, this is why I don't aim for leadership anywhere.
The theory would be that, if you're listening to your congregation, you've polled your leadership, 9 out of 10 of them are against doing the thing, and 1 of them is in favor of doing the thing. Then you probably don't do the thing, right?
I think it really depends on what the thing is. And
now here's the complication. The 10th person, the one who's in favor of doing the thing, is the church's local millionaire who donates half of your budget every Christmas.
I don't think that should make the difference.
And he stands up and says, you can choose to listen to whoever you want, but if you don't do what I want, I will withhold my money. Now you run into what is the big problem that a lot of modern churches have with being decisive, is because most pastors are asked to make a decision between the ability to maintain funds and operate in a capitalist society and the ability to do what's right.
Yeah.
That's what I call the binding of capitalism. And it keeps religion from doing the right thing by making them beholden to resource allocation under capitalism. So if you look at it through that lens, look at a lot of decisions churches make. They're all about keeping the money flowing. And so when you talk about what is church supposed to do for me, a lot of churches aren't thinking about it. They should. They absolutely should. But a lot of them don't.
I think maybe we need to get other perspectives in on this, because this is reminding me of something that I've heard. Please forgive me if this is wrong, because again, the internet is a fountain of misinformation. But I have been given the distinct impression that a lot of Black churches are not like this. That there is a significant population of majority Black churches in America that no, it's about pooling resources and making sure that, so-and-so's kids have enough to eat. And, that the, old lady who sits in the back pew, gets her car fixed when it breaks down, that kind of thing.
Now,
I could be wrong, but I mean, if there are churches out there where that is happening, I feel like credit needs to be given where it's due, because that's
agreed.
like
And look,
be
I come in part from a church where that is actually happening. I'm not saying it's universal.
nice.
Like the church in which I was ordained is a church in which that is actually the way they do business. And
Excellent.
they've found ways, and I love the hell out of them for this. They found ways to actually game the capitalist and governmental systems. They get grants and resources directed to them from the government for doing, like they own an affordable housing corporation, and that they use grant funding to operate to get people in, like refugees in housing and stuff like that. The pastor there's really figured out how to game the system to work it, but not every church out there does that. And to answer your question, with all of my experience as a Black man,
Well, that's why I'm saying
not, by the way, for those of you listening on the podcast, I am the whitest man ever, and that was entirely sarcastic. I just want to make sure I'm clear on that.
you can tell. It's fine.
Yeah.
I don't think anybody needs that information.
No, I'm more clarifying the sarcastic part, but no, in the experience I do have in working a little bit with Black churches and interacting with them as a pastor, I think you're right to say that Black churches tend to lean a little more that way, but it also is denominationally dependent too.
Oh, I'm sure it's not universal. I've just yet to darken the door of a predominantly white church, and that's been like all of them that I've ever been to, which is unsettling, the amount of like
there are some, and the thing is a lot of the churches that aren't like that are churches that are a result of what you could call the progressive pushback, like what we were talking about earlier in the last episode, where those who actually adhere to the message of Jesus, those who would be the mainline Christians if it weren't for the evangelical/Republican takeover of Christianity over the last 100 years, who are starting to push back and say, you know what, denomination, nation, whatever, you do you, but as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. And they start trying to build the institution that it should be locally, rather than trying to, just exist within the systems they're given. There are more and more of those churches, and even ours here is, I hope, an attempt to do that in a radically different way as well. Although it's going to be a while before we're big enough to do anything about that.
We have no money.
Yeah, no, we have no money.
There's not cash flow going on here.
Religious people should be. We're poor. But you do see more and more of that. But it is this push and pull between what churches should be and what churches have been for so long. And that's not a fight that ends quickly or easily.
Mm-hmm.
But of course,
keeping my hands busy again, the ADD.
Yeah. But that brings us back to our main question: is what should church do for you?
And I'm not trying to say, where is the church that will pay my bills either? Like,
honestly though, not a bad question to ask, particularly if you're in a position where you can't pay your bills. Like, your church absolutely should be doing that. And even credit where it's due, even churches that are the old school white methodology, they have benevolence funds. Like my own family, when I was growing up, was a recipient of the benevolence fund of our church when I was real little. Like, that piece is there. It's like an atrophied muscle, but it's there. So I do want to make sure that I'm not, as I tend to, painting things as universally bad. Like, even in the worst of churches, those pieces are still there.
Yeah.
But you say, well, I don't want to ask like I'm inviting the church to pay my bills. Well, why not? Like, if you are part of a community and you are suffering in some particular way, the community should be trying to look out. Like, if you can't,
this might be partly my own malfunction, or like deep-seated guilt or whatever, but I'm also somebody who I'm fairly certain we're eligible for like SNAP benefits or whatever, and I've never applied for them because we get by like without it. So it's like, but at the same time, I would encourage people, if you're eligible for help, it's because you would benefit from it, in a way that's fair.
I think it's worth identifying that very uniquely American attitude there of, I can manage. I don't need help. I have to get by on my own. Like,
Yeah.
the one of the core tenets of the Christian faith as a practice is you don't have to be alone. Like, you don't have to get by on your own. We are literally put here to love and take care of each other. And this is one of the places where we find that American culture and Christian culture are at odds with each other, because American culture insists you have to be able to be self-sufficient. You must be your own person. And if you are not, it is a failing of you as an individual. And Christianity
survive without help, then it's shameful to take it.
Yeah. And Christianity says the exact opposite. Christianity says that if you are only in it for yourself, then you are fundamentally not in the right place. And that is the core of the answer to the question, what should church do for you? Church should incorporate you into a community that looks out for you just as you look out for others. One of the best examples I've seen of this is, this is a type of event, and your modern super white, super Protestant, traditional American churches, they're all about the events, right? About, we're going to do this thing on this day type stuff, right?
Nothing wrong with that.
No, not necessarily. But one of the ones that I've seen a lot of these more progressive churches start doing is offering date night events. Have you ever come across one of those?
No.
It's a very simple thing. It's not about getting money. It's not about anything. What they do is they put the ad out to the community and they say, okay, we're getting all of our people who are able to function as babysitters into the church on the same day. We're going to have them here for about 4, maybe 5 hours. Drop your kiddos. They can play here. You take your spouse, go do your thing. That's it. No, you don't have to pay for anything. You don't have to do anything. You're a part of the community, and God knows you need some time. As a parent, I have a very fond yet not fond memory of shortly after my eldest child was born. She was maybe not even 1. And we had dinner the night before, and for reasons I won't begin to get into, my wife and I came down with the most violent case of simultaneous food poisoning we had ever experienced. We were both like violently, painfully ill to the point where getting out of bed was almost impossible. But we've got a less than 1-year-old who's screaming in the other room. Like, we're not going to be able to change it. We're just dead.
Yeah. You need help.
Yeah. And we got a hold of a family at the church, and they're like, oh, dude, we got you. We're running around today. We could add a baby to our rotation. And they swung by, they picked her up, took her carrier in her stroller, and they were gone for most of the day. Enough time for us to handle our business.
Yeah.
And that, what am I supposed to get out of church? That sort of thing is supposed to be what church is about, where you can call up somebody and say, look, I am having a day and I just need somebody. Or you can call up the church and say, look, I ain't making, either I come up with an extra $50 or the lights are getting turned off.
Yeah.
Can you help?
Or the lights have been turned off and I don't have the 300 they want to turn it back on.
Yeah.
Speaking as someone who's had their lights turned off before, it's hilariously overpriced to get it turned back on. It's not what you owe. It's way more.
Yeah. And by the way, if you're a church that happens to actually be listening to this and thinking, well, I'm not just going to be someone a church that doles out money to whoever needs it, will run out of money. Let me tell you, no, but also no. And one other thing, no. But most importantly, you don't just have to dole out money. Like, never underestimate, particularly in America, the power that an institutional church has to negotiate and work with other organizations. Like, let's take your example. You know, someone calls and says, I got no power and I don't have the $300 to get the electricity on. You know, if you, the person who don't have the $300, calls the electric company and says, I don't have it, can I work something out? The electricity company is going to say, ha ha ha, call me when you have money, poor person.
Yeah.
But if they get a call from, hi, I'm Reverend so-and-so from the church of just down the street, and all of our very, very many parishioners who are looking at you and a little concerned about this unjust situation you have going on here. Now, we're not saying that you have to shirk out any profits or nothing, but can we negotiate a solution here? We'll help pay the bill a little bit, but let's maybe do a thing here. You know, you're much more likely to get a thing done. Negotiating power of a church in society is a tool that you have. There are more tools than just your dollars.
I think there are some people who would argue that if this was done regularly, it would stop working.
Possibly, but then we'd have to find another thing. The church has been historically adaptable in how we respond to things. You know, use your tool until it stops working and then get a different one. You know, find a new one. A great example, I just saw this. This is a church that I used to serve at, is currently running a medical debt forgiveness drive. And literally all they're doing is they're accepting tithes and contributions for a couple of months, and then they're buying medical debt for pennies on the dollar and forgiving it. Like,
that's really cool.
You know,
medical debt.
Setting aside the horrible injustice that medical debt even is, which that's a whole nother thing we could rant about, you know, come time. But these things right here, like this drive that this church is doing to raise money to cancel out medical debt, might only raise a couple $1,000s over the months it's active, which, you know, sounds like a lot to an individual, but for a church raising money over a few months, peanuts. Mm-hmm. But a couple $1,000s buys you a couple $100,000 in medical debt, because, you know, that's how the debt industry works. So that's enough to change multiple people's lives.
Yeah.
You know, you look at, I keep going back to the church that I originally come from in New Jersey, that runs its own affordable housing company, that does refugee and immigration assistance. They have their own ESL classes, all run either by grant funding or by negotiated deals with the government or by people offering their time and talents. Who are, very little of it comes from a dime given by the church or given by the parishioners of that church. But, you know, they've figured out ways to make it happen. And that is the role of a church in society, the people who figure out a way to make it happen. I think that is, if I were to have an answer to the question, I think that'd be about as close as I'm going to get. What do you think?
I think at the end of the day, I'm still not, my battery's running low. But I think so this is probably winding down here.
Yep.
But I think at the end of the day, I'm still going to have a hell of a time finding a brick and mortar church that's like, yeah, that.
Well, then I guess we have to ask the question whether brick and mortar churches are the way to go. And hey, we're building a thing here that isn't that. So hooray!
Well, at the risk of being the negative Nancy, you were just talking about like the childcare sort of thing, which as somebody who has a not quite 2-year-old, not a lot of family lives nearby, you know, not a lot of friends that live in the area, especially who have any kind of comfort level with a toddler. You know, something like that. It's not something you can do with a non-brick and mortar church.
Not something you can do yet. Give me time. We'll figure it out. It might take Star Trek style transportation, but we'll figure it out.
So it'll be a while, is what you're saying.
Well, it's the thing about an experimental new form of doing things. You don't know what's going to.
I know we don't really have time to dive, to plug our noses and dive back into the water too much here, but so forgive me if my feed cuts out. But like as far as what else, because I was always taught that it was, you know, that the church was supposed to be there for like, you know, spiritual fellowship and whatever that means.
I think
that's something still worth exploring. Again, I don't think we have time. Let me see how much.
No, I don't think we have time.
It's usually lying.
Yeah.
8 minutes. So
I
no.
don't think we have time either, so I'm gonna pause it here and suggest that might be a good topic for our next conversation: the spiritual role of the church, because we spent a lot of time talking about the practical. So that'll be a good topic for our next series of episodes. We'll talk about the spiritual role of the church and how it helps to grow and educate and develop you, and basically do a lot of the things that we're trying to do with these creative video series. Anyway,
Right.
for those of you who've stuck around with us this long, thanks for listening. As always, I'm just super geeked that you've actually stuck around to the end of the video. Good job, you. Well done. That's a lot to listen through. Absolutely. Good job. If you want to be part of our community, of course, our Discord server is where it's all at. You can find links to that on our website, which is all in the description. We put out videos like this, our Remote Pastoral Care. We've got Psalms from the Trails that's coming on. We've got our Back to Basics series, which should be going out about now as well. There's a lot of stuff going on. You can join in the comments. You can join in conversation. And of course, join the Discord server. It's totally free. It's not like a charge or anything because, guys, we're a church. We don't do it that way. So if you want to be part of our community, we'd love to have you. But most importantly, I just want to let you know that whatever you're doing, whatever you're struggling with, I'm thinking about you and praying for you this week, and God's with you too. Take care.